Big episode today. Donald Trump, Mar-a-Lago, and what's behind all of this nonsense, including a CONRAD Black comment on 2024. Author and political operative Tasha Kheiriddin talks with me about her new book, The Right Path, and what's likely going to happen next month when the new conservative leader for Canada is named, and my thoughts on uninformed tweets from someone who actually believes the government can run healthcare more efficiently than a profit-hungry corporation. Ha! Right here on Sherman Unlimited.
You wanted real talk, and this is where you'll hear it. Uninhibited by the toxic influences of cancel culture, unvarnished and unfettered, unencumbered by the censorship of traditional radio, uncontaminated by big media interests.
And now, Sherman Unlimited.
In the past week, there's been a lot of comment about Donald Trump and the FBI and the raid on Mar-a-Lago and the fall midterm elections. An awful lot going on in the United States and an awful lot for Canadians to think on. The single most repeated error is that Donald Trump wouldn't be able to run for president in 2024 if he were to be indicted or convicted of a felony. First of all, I don't think either of those things is going to happen, but even if the FBI goes after him, pursues this thing, and turns whatever they've got over to a prosecutor, Trump or anyone else can run for office under any circumstances. Most people don't know that. Trump or anybody could even run from behind bars in a federal prison. There are only a few requirements to run for president of the United States. The candidate has to be naturally born, in other words, born on U.S. soil. So an American who has been born in the United States of America, has lived there for at least 14 years, and is age 35 or over, period. That dates back to the time when they were drafting the Constitution. There are no other rules. So really, conceptually, it was done this way to allow the absolute freedom of choice for all persons voting in any election. So put that idea that the FBI went after him to discredit him sufficiently to keep him from running away in the closet. It just ain't so. So that's the case, and regardless of what your opinion is of Donald Trump, what's behind this? It would, from my perspective, be very wise of the FBI to make its case publicly, and the sooner the better, right now, or announce that on close inspection, the materials gathered are being returned to the former president because they're his to have and to hold, and aren't part of any case being assembled against him. Off the plot is what I say. And tell us what the problem is. Seems Trump met with the FBI people back in June, when federal investigators served a grand jury subpoena and took away sensitive national security documents from former President Trump's property at that time. Investigators executed last week's search in part because they claimed to have developed evidence, including from at least one witness, that there were potentially classified documents still remaining at Mar-a-Lago on the property months after the National Archives arranged for the retrieval of 15 boxes of documents that included classified information, and that was back in January of 2022, this year. Authorities also believed the documents remaining at Mar-a-Lago had national security implications. When federal investigators visited Mar-a-Lago in June to discuss some White House records they believed were still being held at the Palm Beach property, they met the former president and his attorneys. Trump was there at the beginning of the meeting to greet investigators, but he didn't stay to answer any questions. During the meeting, Trump's attorneys showed the investigators documents. Some of them had markings indicating they were classified. The agents were given custody of the documents that were marked top secret or higher. We, the public, have yet to find out if they think they have anything of note that was unlawfully in Trump's possession. We don't know any such thing as yet. My view? Attorney General Merrick Garland desperately wants to strike a blow against Donald Trump because he is fully aware of two things. Trump will campaign hard against Democratic candidates in the impending midterm elections, and many believe both houses of Congress will become Republican-controlled as of November. What does that mean? It means, well, Biden and Harris, you're a couple of lame ducks. And then it's on to November 2024 with a very likely Donald Trump candidacy for president and a very likely win for him at that time. You can debate whether that will lead to civil war or not amongst yourselves. Conrad Black, writing in the National Post recently, said categorically that Donald Trump will be a successful president again. Not that different from what Lord Black told me on this program last fall.
Remember, in 2016, people were so flabbergasted that he overthrew this ghastly, crooked, log-rolling, back-scratching society that the rhinos and the Dems operate. They change the White House every 8 years and change the Congress every 4 or 6 years, but 90% of the government just sits there with the same people moving steadily to the left. And he said this is all corrupt and it's not working. And that's why they went through all that nonsense about Russia collusion, 2 phony impeachments and so on. They're not getting away with it again, Peter. They can't do it again. And next time he's going to win by 20 million votes. And he'll have a mandate to really clean the place up, and he will.
Conrad Black on Trump 2024. I'm Peter Sherman.
In your face.
Tasha Kheiriddin is an author and a political observer with a lot of experience on conservatism in Canada. She's offered it up in print and in her current book, which is called The Right Path. Still does regularly via the National Post, and you can catch her on both radio and television here and there. Tasha is a principal at Navigator, the well-known Toronto-based research and public affairs firm, and she is co-chair of the Jean Charest Conservative Leadership Campaign, and that's not all. We used to work together as colleagues. Hi, Tasha.
It's great to be here, Peter. Thank you so much.
Whoever thought we'd be doing this? Look, you've written The Right Path, which is selling pretty well out there, as I understand. Happy for you, but given the double entendre that's inherent in the title, why don't you share the overarching message you're trying to sell?
Sure. The Right Path is subtitled How Conservatives Can Unite, Inspire, and Take Canada Forward. And I started writing the book after the last election because it was clear that Conservatives had failed to do this. They'd lost 3 times in a row. And then since then, things took on a life of their own with the Freedom Convoy, the dismissal, I will say, of Erin O'Toole, and then the leadership race that, as you mentioned, I'm involved in as well. And the book, through all this, basically evolved to an exploration of the currents that conservatives are grappling with right now, which is basically populism and conservatism. And I call it The Right Path because it is a play on words. You know, conservatives are right of center, but it's also, I think, the right path for Canada.
I'm glad that you're doing this, and I'm glad that people are considering it as a result of you doing it. It's certainly something that, as a former elected official myself, I've considered, and I look at, you mentioned Stephen Harper and Peter MacKay together kind of put the Alliance and the Reform and the Progressive Conservatives aside, and they created the CPC, which is the party that we have now, Conservative Party of Canada. So explaining what conservatism is about and trying to bring things together so that it doesn't, I'm not going to say splinter again, I'm going to say remain splintered again, is a very important work.
Well, thank you. I think it's also important just from a democratic perspective because you want to make sure Canadians have a choice of governing party. We live in a situation very different from the U.S. where you have 2 main parties who, tend to alternate over periods of time. The big thing, the difference in our system, of course, is that you have multiple parties. So for the Conservatives, this has been an issue because the Liberal Party has traditionally been the dominant party politically that's held power. Conservatives have fought between themselves, have splintered, as you pointed out. I mean, the Reform Party is the most recent incarnation of that. So from a democratic perspective, it's important to have a viable alternative to the current government. So that's one of the things I say, too, in the book is that, we need to build a big tent, a big enough tent, that you get the voter bases I talked about and you win in places that Conservatives aren't winning now. Because to your point, they haven't been able to move beyond the more Western and rural base where they are really solid to capture the seats they need to have majority. Well,
there's so much to do. It's not a simple thing. Yes, the West is and always really has been fairly conservative, and the East is, and for most of the period that Canada has existed, has been liberal, except if you go back to the very beginning, Sir John A. was, I guess, the father of conservatism. But conservatism doesn't mean what we think it means now. I think most of the people I run into, younger people particularly, but even my own age, they look at conservatism and they say, well, you're just Republicans in Canada. And I think that's, pardon me, bullshit.
Yeah, it is. It is bullshit. It is not true. It is, and that's a problem of perception, and perception becomes reality. And so that's something I talk about as well in The Right Path, is the importance of defining what is conservatism. And to do that, I actually reach far back. I go to Edmund Burke in 1789 to start off, because he's the original conservative in England. He's a philosopher who founded conservatism. He's the first person to use the term and articulate what it was. And it was a response to the French Revolution, which was essentially a populist uprising in which a lot of heads rolled. And his reaction to that was, wait a minute, that is too aggressive an approach to social change. What do I believe in? I'm a conservative. I want to conserve the past, learn from it, and move forward, but in an incremental and, he thought, much more sensible way. And so what his conservatism was about was a balance, really, of rights and responsibilities, the individual and the community, taking the lessons of the past and moving forward. It's actually very much like you said. It's MacDonald's original vision. He called himself a progressive conservative, in his own words. He had the Liberal Conservative Party, which founded our country, which then became known as the Conservative Party. But it brought in a sense of, personal things, the personal issues of freedoms and this kind of thing, which are also liberal values with a small L. But in such a way that, in his view, it's basically pillars of society, or things like the family, law and order, the little platoons, like community organizations. Conservatism is very much about local government. This is something I think that is actually very appealing today, because people feel that they're being, talked down to from on high, which is, true in the case of Trudeau. We can get into that if you want. But my point is simply that conservatism is very appealing because it wants government to be done at the level closest to the people.
People have a real hard time understanding, like you've drilled down a little bit. And I think from my own experience, and I've been a conservative for, I hate to say it, 40, 45 years, since I was really a thinking adult and not just walking into the polling station and doing, what most people do, which is rote voting. Oh, my dad voted Liberal, I'm going to vote Liberal. My dad voted Conservative, that kind of thing. And so I look at conservatism today, and I look at the splintering that always takes place. We saw it in the Ontario election, for example, but we see it federally as well, because one guy who was running for leader of the Conservatives took his marbles and went home and created the PPC, the People's Party of Canada, and that's Max Bernier. So that takes away from what I can see right now, 4 or 5% of people who should be voting conservative and should understand that they're part of what goes into the big tent. So the question is begged, can conservatives win?
They can win. I really believe they can, if they are true to what they are, and if they don't scare people off. This is a problem that we're encountering, unfortunately, and I'm not putting on a partisan hat in this leadership race, but I do wear one, but I'm saying this more as an observer, in the sense that people I've spoken to while writing the book have said they are very concerned by what they see in terms of populist rhetoric that's being used, because they are frightened by it, particularly people from New Canadian backgrounds who I talked to and said, when we see the convoy and we see flags on pickup trucks and this kind of thing and talk of freedom, for us, that it's actually, we feel that it's more like taking our freedoms away. It's a dog whistle. It's not what it was. In the U.S., the word freedom's become a very different concept. It's been weaponized, and that is so unfortunate, because freedom is what conservatism is about. Liberty is a huge cornerstone. But it's, the balance between my liberties and yours has to be respected. So I talk in the book about language and how, if you're going to move forward with conservatism, frame it in a way that's appealing to people, that gives them what they really want. And most people, honestly, it's not about becoming freer. It's about having opportunity to achieve their dreams and do things they want to do, whether it's own a house or get a job or see their kids succeed. Opportunity is a positive phrasing of this. And so opportunity conservatism is something that has caught fire, and even in the U.S. it's become a thing. I think that is something positive we could have up here that would not alienate people who feel left out of the more populist rhetoric.
Well, I'm going to ratchet this conversation up a little bit, and I'm going to tell you,
go ahead.
On a personal basis, I can't see the future for Canada to any a long-term degree in the event that we don't find, it happens to be the Conservative Party, but some party that is willing to take on Justin Trudeau, because I don't think that Justin Trudeau is handling things in Canada in such a way that Canada has a reasonable survivability. I know those are fighting words, but, we're 150 years old. Nobody ever wrote somewhere in the Bible that countries have to be more than 150 years old. We can dissolve, and Ontario would easily be swallowed up by the States, and the Maritimes is a thing unto itself. Quebec, I think, secretly, and maybe not so secretly, wants to be separate. What's to say that Canada has to stay together? And in the event that you've got a Trudeau who goes as far as we heard over the last couple of days, invoking the Emergencies Act because he just plain didn't want to go down and talk to these truckers back in the winter. If you've got that kind of a jerk, and those are my words, running the country, and you've got no alternative, you'd better be explaining conservatism properly.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's unpack some of that. I think that I'm not as pessimistic as you. First of all, that our country is about on the brink of dissolution. I'm not there.
I hope you're right and I'm wrong.
I know in Quebec it's really not a thing. The PQ right now is at 10% in the polls in their upcoming provincial election. They are not in that frame of mind. Out west, I think there's more of a separatist impulse. We've seen, out and out discussion of that in the UCP race, with the Alberta, Separation Act or whatever they're calling it, Daniel Smith's project, and the idea that they would be autonomous on decision making from the federal government. So there's a lot of anger out west, and this anger has been fueled by Trudeau. To circle to that point you made too, there is a connection because Trudeau has demonized the oil and gas industry. He has, not listened to the West in part because they don't vote for him, and they feel that, that it's an awful thing, but he doesn't take them too seriously because of that fact, because he knows they're not in the same frame of mind. He pushes a very woke agenda, culturally speaking, which is also anathema to a lot of people out west. And it's not even so much, issues of social conservatism or anything like that. There have been some of those, but it's more the identity politics that he plays and the sense that he relishes division because it is politically good for him. And unfortunately, he's been right? He has
so far
stoked those fires. So you got to turn that back on him and say, hey, you know what? To your point, he doesn't have to be this way. We are not going to be dividers either, though. And that's where I worry about the Conservatives right now, is a lot of division. I mean, the Emergencies Act, there was concern about whether it was invoked properly, or whether it should have been invoked or not.
On the other hand, this was at the beginning, and if it had lasted 3 days and they'd gone home, a legitimate protest that the government in place didn't take seriously.
Well, if it had lasted 3 days, Peter, there would have been no Emergencies Act. And that's my point I was going to get to, is that it actually has been painted as a peaceful, happy protest by a lot of the people who were there. And there were some elements of that, sure. But there was also stuff that wasn't, and that's not being fully acknowledged. Some people acknowledge it, but organizers of this continuously maintained they were peaceful. Occupying a city for 3 weeks isn't peaceful. I don't care what you say. I couldn't park my truck in front of Parliament Hill. I'd get a ticket. So there's a lot of issues around that and how it was handled and, how it dragged on. To your point, if it hadn't done that, I think there would have been a lot more sympathy and a lot more support for what the convoy represented. But it devolved into all sorts of strange things, and conspiracy stuff and like a whole bunch of stuff attached itself to it, which was unfortunate because there were a lot of people there who were there for the right reasons. They felt hard done by. They felt the government was overreaching. They were frustrated. They wanted to be heard.
Last question, and it's a significant one for you. You started off when the Conservatives suddenly found themselves looking for a leader a few months back. You were running. You were going to run. For a couple of weeks, you considered it, but you ultimately decided against it, and you threw your support behind Jean Charest, the former Quebec premier, and I might say one-time short-lived leader of the National Progressive Conservative Party. What does he represent to you that grabs you versus the way the media darling Pierre Poilievre is taken? Because what we hear, and this is all we hear, is, hey, there's 600,000 votes out there to be counted. Pierre owns 300 and something thousand of them, and the other 5 split them up. So obviously he's going to win. You don't think that?
No, I don't think that. I don't think he owns those votes per se either. People have been signed up, but they have to turn out. That's one thing. People have to they have to send in their ballots and vote. A lot of the folks I know that the Pierre's camp has recruited are not political. and they're new to politics. They're new to the system, so to speak. So there's a process issue too. A lot of people who are used to going through this exercise, and the Conservatives have done it. Sadly, this is the third kick at the can in 5 years. That's not healthy for the party, but it also means a lot of people they know the drill. A lot of those folks don't. Getting people out to vote will be the key here, and without getting down into the weeds, it's a system, also a point system, whereby you got to grow the membership. You got to get points across the country in places where there hasn't been a lot of conservative activity. There's not much point growing things in the West, where we have some cases the party has 70% support in ridings in election time.
Yeah, but then you go into the Beauce in Quebec, a little harder.
You need to grow it in the GTA. You need to grow it in Quebec. You need to grow it in Atlantic Canada, where the party's not doing well. And that's what the Charest team is focused on and what he's done. So, no, I don't think that the result is decided by any stretch of the imagination, even though people would like it to be. The other thing I will say is why did I choose Jean Charest? Well, okay, for one thing, I've known him for 30 years. He is a person of integrity. He's in this race for the right reasons. He really doesn't have to be. Like, he has a private sector career that he's left to do this. But overall, he's always been a man who listens politically, and that's very important. And right now, the vision he has, that's why I got behind him, because I realized I couldn't win this. My path to victory was really narrow. I'd been out of politics for 20 years, partisan politics. It's a family business. People have loyalties, and people would tell me on the phone. I mean, I spoke to hundreds of people. They're like, I love you, Tasha. You're great.
But
I owe Pierre this. He helped me in my riding, and he's a good guy. Or I know Jean for so long, and he's helped me. People had different loyalties they developed over time. And I realized that you can't carpet bag these things. So I thought, you know what? The vision's more important than me having this job, potentially. I would like to see Canada on the right track, and the party too. So I talked to Jean a couple times during the race. I said, this is where things are. I'd like to join your team and support you. And he's like, great. So that's how that happened. And then I kept writing the book and finished the book. And the book came out. And so I'm wearing, like you said, 5 hats right now. It's a busy time, but it's exciting too, because I really do have hope. I hope the party will pick the right path and go down it, and we'll all be successful in the end.
The Right Path is the name of the book. It's available where all great books are sold. And Tasha Kheiriddin, what a pleasure talking to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Peter. So great to do this again. Thank you.
Nobody is getting canceled anymore. Not around here.
More in a moment.
Do you ever get on Twitter just to look or to troll? That is to say, cause trouble? Or do you ever post a tweet where some stranger comes back at you and shows an understanding of the way the world works that is so convoluted that you wonder how we are even on the same planet? And don't you wish you had some of whatever that person was smoking? Yeah, me too. Anyway, I was on the receiving end of a series of tweets from someone I don't know the other day. This person may have been responding to something I'd have said about a massive redo of the Canada Health Act and a legitimate examination of a changed system, a mixed system, in my view, where we would entertain some public-private mix. This, to me, makes sense. The act dates back about 55 years. It was written when Canada was young, when people were young, when the cost for health care across the population was low. Now Canada is an older country. Statistics tell us that the vast majority of our lifetime of health care is delivered in the final 10% of that lifetime. No wonder we're caving in trying to meet the demand, and that's before even considering COVID-19. The tweet responder was trying to educate me and several others about why involving the private sector can't work and why we need government in control. Here's one of the tweets, and I quote, "Corporations' only reason for existence is to make money for their owners while shielding them from liability. Government works beautifully when the citizens pay attention and keep them in control. The people fell asleep. Government just manages the funding of the assets we all use." End quote. Well, disappointed as I may be to let you know this, there are many corporations that run really well, really efficiently. They do exist to make products or provide services that generate profit, which is not a dirty word, contrary to what your thinking process seems to imply. Shareholders want profit, but the enlightened corporate world is aware that efficiency guarantees that will happen. And companies also tend to involve themselves in their communities. Government doesn't know how to be efficient. Government officials tasked with providing services efficiently would better be described as chemists, because they demonstrate every day how you take good money and turn it into shit. Here's more from the mystery tweeter, and I quote, "It is your government managing the dollars given by everyone to run the systems we all use. The public has somehow been convinced by people who benefit from our neglect of the system that the government is supposed to be run like a business. A business can fire employees who are unwilling or unable to work. Then they become the government's responsibility. The government cares for everyone, not just those who are wealthy." End quote. Newsflash, if the government were run like a business, we wouldn't be talking about this. Canada's colleagues on a world scale in healthcare, supplied by their wonderful governments alone, are Cuba and North Korea. Doesn't that speak for itself? The rest of the socialized medicine in the world comes with some parts operated by the government and others by private companies. That is pretty much the case in all European countries. Some things are managed well corporately. And yes, there is profit built in, but it still is more efficient and less costly than letting greasy government hands involve themselves in everything. That's what we ought to be thinking about. I'm Peter Sherman.
Sherman Unlimited.
Let Peter know what's on your mind. Drop him an email. info@petersherman.com.
Find future episodes wherever you find your favorite podcasts. So if you like what you heard, tell a friend. If you really liked it, tell 3 friends. If you really hated it, tell 3 enemies. We'll talk again soon.